This is House Planning Help, episode 171. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is interior designer Elina Grigoriou, and we're going to be looking at creating sustainable interiors. First, though, I'm heading back to the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre in Swindon. This is next month for a couple of days where I'm going to be doing some talks, hopefully, fingers crossed, unravelling a new talk, which will be looking more about designing a passive house and just designing houses, I suppose, in general, some of the things that I've learned, some useful tips that I feel I can share just to try something new. However, I'm putting a caveat on that because life is quite busy. Not only are we moving house at the moment to try and free up the equity and then moving into rented accommodation, but we've got a new baby who will just turn up when she's ready. And then there's the UK Passive House Awards. We've got filming for that, which will be underway soon. I can't believe we're round to that for another year. So that's all very exciting. But houseplanninghelp.com/events will always tell you what we're up to. Quick thank you to do before we lead into our interview with Elina, and that's to Rory Bergin, and he connected us when I said, is there any such thing as a sustainable interior designer? And he said, yes, you want to speak to Elina, and she's wanted to do this since she was about 15. She told me, this is a great fact, she had a slight diversion, becoming a professional basketball player for a while, and then after that took a BA in interior design. She worked for 10 years for a commercial architectural firm, and then she set up her own business. And she's got loads of experience, very passionate, as I think you're going to discover in a few moments. So first question to Elina was, can you define interior design?
Interior design is looking specifically the spaces that fall within the floor slab, the ceiling slab, and the external walls, and that's everything inside it. From the moment you actually step into a building till you come back out of it, everything you touch, every way you interact with that space is forming the interior and the way that has been intentionally designed to support your life.
Often with self-builders, perhaps it hasn't been that intentionally. The layout may have been, thoroughly gone over. But so what would an interior designer bring to a home?
First of all, you are working with the existing building. So you do have to acknowledge whether the original architecture had assumed a particular user journey. From the moment somebody was coming in, what kind of volumes and spatial proportions did they actually envisage the interiors to have? So many times this has not been considered. And that's where you can get quite structural. So you either start perhaps reforming spaces, opening up floors or closing up floors, to then going all the way to the cutlery and the curtains and tassels, as I call it. But it doesn't, many times interiors can be considered curtains and tassels, but it isn't. It's actually understanding, how is the space affecting me? How is this interior affecting me?
On a new build then, what part of the process would an interior designer best come in,
I would say straight at the early stages. I would suggest that you start consulting on the kind of spatial volumes you want when you're actually forming the architecture, the size, the views. If you're considering, what kind of lifestyle do I want to have in this building? You are already considering it as a user in the interior. So to be honest, it's that stage. Whenever you start thinking, well, my building is going to be placed there, and this is how I'm going to be living in there, then that is the point you consider interior designer.
How do you get on with architects then?
I have many very good friends that are architects. It's two things. One, it's a evolution of the actual specialisms in our society in this age. And I think the whole definition of the interior design profession has kind of arisen out of more knowledge being available, but also the need to actually understand and reuse existing buildings better. So whereas new builds, it tends to fall off the interior. And you've got the whole procurement issue also. There you've got spec development going on rather than end user building and developing. And I think in the whole self-build, there's a massive opportunity there to do it right from the beginning for the particular user. And you find, especially in commercial and residential developments, a lot of that insight is lost because you are trying to create a vanilla flavor for people with personality. And I think the whole self-build kind of ethos does definitely create this opportunity to engage, to make it fit for purpose, really.
I think one of the concerns I have is money. We all know that that's a big factor of self-build, and we definitely want an interior designer on our project. But at the moment, it's, I suppose, taken a back seat. And from what you're saying, that's not a good thing. Everyone that you speak to, no matter what the discipline, they all want to be in at the beginning, but somehow that just doesn't seem practical sometimes. So how can we make this work? You know, who should I be looking for? And maybe you can just give us a bit of guidance.
I'm going to throw it back to you. Why do you want an interior designer?
Well, because I personally feel it makes a space more vibrant, and that we would be terrible doing it ourselves. I don't trust myself that much, and I think it'd just be a really important space to work on to get it as good as you could possibly get, because you spend 90% of your time indoors, and I work from home too.
Yeah, okay, so that's a really good issue. So we can look at actually your workplace area too and see how that's affecting your productivity from home. So I think that understanding what the benefits are of and the impacts of the interior are very important, because that immediately kind of quantifies whether it's a qualitative or quantitative sort of result. You know, why is the interior important or not? That can happen obviously without us being there from day one, absolutely. But the value of having the right people on board it's definitely down on personalities and having the right mix. And you can get someone who really understands the process, but isn't perhaps the right fit for the team, for the project, and the value they can add through whether that's a question, whether that's a proposal, whether that's a whole concept, it could be anything, is going to be so paramount to make it harmonize with the client, with the team, to make it as best value as you can. Because I think I see some people procuring interior design services and the aims being extremely impersonal. And there is this whole thing, oh, well, I must hire an interior designer because I'm supposed to. Or I should hire an interior designer because the Joneses did. And interior design has been shoehorned into this sort of image-conscious shoebox, which is not at all true. Using an interior designer is about actually creating a living environment. So if someone wants to create a home that feels like a home that you can host people, work in, and allow it to affect you in a positive way, and knowledgeably affect you in a positive way, then that's a great reason to bring them in. If it is to actually save money, and definitely I completely understand the limitations of budgets and timescale sometimes, and too many cooks. You can have loads of people on a project, and if you have too many people, you end up actually not making the most of each member. So it is about bringing him at the right time. I think breaking down services of an interior designer can actually benefit. So instead of having them on the full service right at stage 1 of, let's say, the rebar work stages, you could actually have them dip in a day or two and just review the current sort of architectural proposals and give you some feedback and maybe just ask you questions. I ask questions. We follow the stages that the RIBA suggest. They're kind of common language in the industry, so a lot of people do recognize those. Very, very sort of broad umbrella. You are starting obviously from the feasibilities initially to concept design, then detail design and developing all the packages for tender. So interior design follows very similar stages, and you start from actually understanding the brief. What is the brief? Understanding the users, and that's something we specialize in a lot, as in designing for well-being, which is obviously part of a sustainable design. It's understanding, well, how are users going to behave in the space? If you do not support user behavior inside an interior, they are going to override any targets you set. The lights is the obvious one. If you don't understand how people actually use lights effectively, they will override any kind of systems you set and programs you set for energy efficiency. So understanding users and making sure you design for the tasks that they're trying to do is fundamental to sustainable design. And thinking about sustainability and that being a key KPI in our projects is very much the sort of life cycle thinking. When we're looking at building life cycle, a lot of architects will look at sort of 20, 30-year lifespans or more. When you're looking, and that will inform product and material decisions, but when you're actually looking at interiors, you're looking between 5 to 10 years for the average interior life cycles. So the materials you're going to use, the way you're going to procure them is going to be very different to what you would do the normal sort of cladding of buildings, concrete and screeding and things like that, because you have much faster purchasing and shorter purchasing cycles. So the impacts to the environment are much greater and in much smaller touch points. So it is more challenging to create a sustainable interior because of also that market being a little bit further back as far as awareness. So you've got many, many more fit out and interior refurbishment subcontractors who have much less time on a job, so much less capacity to read up on what it means for them to be sustainable. So it falls very much on ourselves as designers then to make sure we've specified things that are sustainable in the first place, talked with our clients very much to understand how they're going to use the space. So where are the environmental impacts going to happen from the client's own behavior in the space? If you're working from home, then actually you're going to have heating on potentially longer periods, lighting on in longer periods than a traditional working household will. So understanding that in the brief right at the beginning is fundamental to creating a real sustainable interior.
How do I brief you then? I know we've done podcasts before on briefing an architect. How similar is it?
You make yourself available for my questions.
Oh.
You do. So very much. I will create I would ask you very simple things. Well, how many bedrooms do you want, of course, and
okay,
have you
4.
4, lovely. And do you entertain at home?
Yes.
Do you work out at home?
No.
How long do you want to live there?
Hopefully a long time, but
do you want to rent it out?
No.
So all these questions will slowly inform, or how do we want the space to be? And then is it in a particular location where is it an existing building?
No, new building.
New building. Was it designed?
In a village.
In a village, lovely. So then we're looking at, first of all, geographical location. Are you going to be there all throughout the year? Hot, cold?
It's going to be a passive house, so.
But do you like lots of fresh air in your interior? As a family. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's tendencies for each user to want to live in a particular way. Do you like a lot of natural daylight coming in? How are you going to clean it?
So something like that. Obviously, that decision on daylight is traditionally an architect's choice. They're going to choose how big the windows are or the openings.
If it's a new build, yes. But if it's an existing and we're refurbishing, that's where we will actually, if there isn't a lot of daylight, we will actually try and introduce roof lights or increase the width and look at specs, obviously, that then suddenly comply with energy efficiency on that too. Because you've got more daylight, less artificial light, better circadian rhythms, that comes into well-being. But you've got to obviously balance out the whole energy loss, obviously, from more glazing. So part of the briefing, you've got those basic questions. Then you've got what I would call design, look and feel. So actually, what kind of look are you looking for? Something very minimalist? Is it all about pure monoblock surfaces? Or are we looking for a bit of texture, some lovely crafts inside there, perhaps lots of details that you either have found yourselves that you love that are perhaps local effects or your travels? So then you start creating
travels, yeah.
Lovely. So then you start creating, okay, well, how does that come in? How does that, what creates the interior? Is it the building or is it the stuff? What is it that's actually going to fit on your skin comfortably? That you feel I live and breathe this interior because it's me. And it's not like a foreign skin onto me. And that is where we work together on the design, look and feel. I will start doing questions that will start going into your psychology. And I will create what we call a user profile. And that's going to basically give us that sort of brief where every question we ask in the design process goes back to that. When you go away a weekend and suddenly you come back to me and you say, oh my God, I found this amazing fabric that I saw in this exotic place or local fishing village. And you say, we must have this in this interior. We will go back to the design, look and feel. And I will say, right, does that line up with what you said you wanted on day one? And you yourself will go through the process of, actually, no, I said I wanted that. This is a great fabric. Yes, but is it relevant to the interior you're trying to create in your house? So it's not about saying no to it, but it's actually going through the process of, well, what did we agree we're trying to create? And you've got the ability to evolve that, but at least you've got a clean sort of basis of where you started from and why. Now, the why is very important, because saying, okay, I'm just going to go for planes, I've got to explain to you why actually that would be the right decision for you. Because where you are in your life, your whole psychological sort of basis of what you find pretty, because beauty is very important. And perception of beauty is personal to everybody's own conditions at the time. So I've got to work with you to understand what you consider beautiful.
And not just me, you've got to work with my wife as well, and we're trying to create a home for
and a family. Yes. Very true.
No idea what my young children might enjoy as well as they grow up.
Yes, and they'll be influenced by what they surround themselves
yes.
with. So there's a particular colour of blue that I always see and reminds me of the home I grew up, because all our shutters in Greece, where I grew up, were this particular colour of blue. So if I ever use that, I have to be able to separate as a designer my own influences of the symbolism of that colour and understand actually how does my client think about it and how suitable is it to them.
Here's a question then, because I've never really been one to select lots of fashionable clothes and, I just get some jeans on, get a shirt on or something like that. So in this process of going through interiors, am I going to be any good at this?
You are, but you just asked, there's two different questions I think you've asked me there. One, about fashion, and two, are you going to be any good at it? So fashion comes and goes. I don't. I look at it with a nod, but really if I'm trying to design for two human beings, let's say in your case, you are individuals that have been evolving over however many, 30 years, I'm sure.
Oh, good one. 40.
And what you find beautiful is not going to be dictated by fashion, unless you want to be always evolving your interior based on the annual trend. And again, that can be designed in. But that's very important for us to have understood at the beginning. Then whether you're good at something is not the question. It's whether we will be able to work together for me to guide you to make those decisions. And that's exactly, we try to demystify, clarify, and in the end, support you to make the decisions that you're going to be happy with. And I've got to be able to give you the right information that you need for any concern or worry you've got where I don't understand that.
So there's a similarity here between an architect as well, because they are trying to ask you lots of questions to get that building up in the first place. Mm-hmm. And it's a process that is iterative.
Yes.
So in the same way, you're trying to understand what I like and don't like, and then is it iterative too?
In our approach it is. You will get some design companies that don't do it like that. They will have either a house style or will perhaps be more definitive about what good design is and tell you. And I think it's horses for courses. We don't approach it that way because one of the objectives for interiors is to support occupants' well-being. You cannot do that unless you know the people, unless you have this conversation. And you also get ownership with that. And what that supports is very much the environmental impacts that you're trying to reduce. If you do not get occupier support on the process, the clients tend to not understand the value or the impacts of the interior they're inheriting and owning. So for sustainable interiors, it's quite important to get involvement, understanding, and for us to be able to explain to them why we're suggesting certain materials, why we're not, why we're designing the layout in a particular way based on, how they think they're going to use the space. Because if they don't understand the thinking behind it, they will misuse the space and then create environmental impacts.
While you're mentioning that, sustainability and well-being, all of these elements are important to you. Is that why people search you out? Is that a key driver?
It is actually. We've mostly been approached because we have such a strong sort of sustainability theme going on in a lot of our work and just in our branding and website. It's something that we want to... It's two reasons. We want to make sure that people understand there is sustainable interiors, there is such a thing, but two, because we want to attract like-minded people. We sometimes get recommended to clients that don't really, it's not a KPI to have a sustainable space, but very happy that it comes with the services that we give. And ultimately, we'd like to get to that point that people come to us because it's good design, it's not sustainable design, and that's the default. But obviously, the industry is a long way off from that at the moment. We do find, though, people do seek us out and we get recommended because we are perhaps spreading a more sustainable message on procurement, on design, or specification or anything. And also well-being. Well-being is a massive issue at the moment. People care about how the space is going to affect them. We find actually a lot of people don't understand that the space had the effect on them that it does. And when we start talking about how they behave in an interior, slowly they start realizing how the space is informing some of the behaviors they have, or stops them behaving in a certain way that they'd like to behave in, and realize that the space is part of the challenge. Whether you're sleeping well or whether you're eating well, like a square table and a round table will have a very different impact on the way two people are going to communicate. Are you sitting opposite each other or beside around, no sides? You've never seen a diplomacy table that's square, have you? They're all round. It's a particular reason for that. So if you're having a dinner table with your in-laws, perhaps it's quite a nice idea to have a round table rather than a square rectangular one. But again, design trend maybe has been going more rectangular in sort of trends, let's say. So that has influenced perhaps a lot of rectangular furniture. But then that will have an effect on how you behave inside that interior. Then patterns and shapes. So if you're going through a stage of life that's quite, with a lot of upheaval, is quite sort of unstable, if you have more patterns around, usually that will actually relax you. We as human beings find patterns reassuring, and we trust things that are repeated, unfortunately, even if they're not true. So you do find that actually repetition will bring calmness. Then again, balance or asymmetry. Which way is your interior going to? The designer can feel itself, and that will make your behavior reflect that. You'll have more movement, asymmetry, or more calmness and steadiness if you have a balanced style. So how you're going to lay out your furniture, how you're going to actually create the elevations of your cupboards, to the whole relationship of the rooms themselves, and your whole user journey from coming into the space and going to any particular space will have that kind of effect on you. So that's part of the brief, and that's where the design value comes in of us being on board. It's actually to ensure that we can support the life and the decisions and the behaviour that you will have inside an interior space.
Can we talk about old homes versus new homes? What I mean by that is I'm in my old home and I've got a load of furniture, for example, and it would seem to me the most ecological thing to do would be just to use all of that furniture all over again, and that would minimise the impact. Or could you view it as actually, well, I'll just pass it on to someone else, they'll be using it, because really this is a blank canvas project.
That's exciting. So can I assume you haven't considered reusing or fitting in existing furniture in your new home?
Well, I think we would like to, but I am also not ruling it out if it's a good reason to try something else. Plus, we're creating a bigger house than we have, so we're definitely going to need some new things. And that's why, in some respects, this project of creating this great eco home, it doesn't add up. In many ways, I'm far more ecological in my small, tiny home. That's just one of the downsides, I guess, of having a bigger house.
It is. So it'd be interesting to see how you, because it's obviously a passive house, which I think is fantastic, that it would be interesting to see how that actually looks like over 10 years rather than one. And also how you are going to evolve your own behaviour. So I'd be very keen to see your feedback. Now, there's two things. One, I would have immediately from day one asked you to consider which furniture you're going to keep or not. If it is a bigger house, a lot of the furniture you have at the moment is going to look very piddly inside it. So unless that's a particular design intent, then I would obviously question whether you can reuse to start off with some of them. Now, maybe some of them can be modified, or you create additions which work with what you've got. The big question mark would be the dining table. Is it too big or too small for your dining room? That's usually one thing that catches lots of people out. And also the size of the soft seating. So soft seating, everybody thinks is an armchair, but it's not. You have very bulky soft seating and quite compact soft seating. So that's another thing. So you get a lot of people buying, a sofa and 2 armchairs in a showroom, then they take it home and suddenly they haven't got enough space to actually walk between them. Things look much smaller in different spaces. So I think that's quite important. But overall, let's assume that you've got similar spaces. Trying to reuse it would be ideal. Reupholstering can be, if budget's an issue, can be a bit cost prohibitive sometimes. But I always recommend it, especially when some of the armchairs could be heirlooms or, just have that right fit for your body. It's very hard to get the right fit sometimes with soft seating. But sometimes also it's right to give it away. It's part of what is one of the unique selling points, I think, of definitely self-build, which is in your case, is the fact that you are making a space for you. If a piece of furniture has been part of your life for 5 or 10 years and is perhaps emotionally associated with those years, you are suddenly perhaps not feeling sort of reflective by that. It's not reflecting what you are and who you are right now. And that takes us back to actually the brief. What is the brief? What are you designing it for? Does this represent who you are now and for the next 10 years? And that will also satisfy your comfort, basically, in that interior, because you want to feel comfortable in it. If you don't feel comfortable, you will be changing things. So that will affect your environmental impact. Whether that's leaving lights on longer, you will try to express it in a different way and to fix it in a way. So I think it's actually preemptive to try and get the furniture that is going to suit you. And that could be retain or give away. Now, the perception that actually giving something away is waste. So, I don't know what condition your objects are at right now, but I've been always surprised how many people want exactly the item you've got right now, and they've got exactly the right place to use it. So giving it, not you reusing it, does not mean, and please, it should not mean for anyone, throwing. It means passing it on.
How?
So there's a few websites popping up at the moment that you can post things and recycle. So FreeCycle, Pre-Loved, and there's a few university-specific schemes. You're getting industries that are creating their own sort of exchange platforms. Loop is another one that's coming out soon that's trying to actually work with smaller entities, because a lot of these sort of exchange programs have either been area specific, which makes sense because of the transport, but also have been relying on bigger companies being able to process things and have somewhere to store it until you want to get rid of it. But there's more coming out now that are recognizing, the sort of the faster pace of getting rid of something, because I would assume I don't know how long you're going to actually be moving in, but many times it could be a week, to a month that you have got to get rid of your stuff before you sell or rent, and you need your new stuff in. So it depends how you're obviously moving in and how you're phasing out. Or in.
Haven't even thought about that. Seems years away.
So that's something you have to consider, because that will dictate, what can you order if you're ordering new, or if you're reupholstering, what are you going to sit and eat at? If you're, refinishing the tops of your dining table, can you do it once you've moved in? There's just a few practical things, again, that we usually build that into the design itself. Sometimes it can be quite specialist sort of treatment or upholstering that you want to do. Now, when it comes to, so it's got better over the years, but some of the more environmentally friendly approaches to, for example, upholstering fabrics and sort of the actual the fillers inside soft seating is depending on very few manufacturers or crafts suppliers around the country, which makes it harder logistically for you to actually do it. So there is, for example, a couple of companies, one in Cornwall, I think, and one in Bedfordshire, that are doing sort of coconut fillers in soft seating. And this is brilliant to see alternatives to the chemical foams that a lot of soft seating furniture has been using over the last decades. And that is affecting, and especially with passive house, where you've got much higher, of course, air tightness and much lower air exchange. any material you're going to put in, any piece of furniture, even your plastic cutlery covers or whatever, is going to be emitting emissions in your space. So the quality of air inside there is going to be 100% dependent on whatever you're introducing in the interior. So making sure you're introducing zero pollutants is ideal. But let's say, depending...
Unlikely, though.
Well, the reuse... So when you're reusing furniture, that will fall into two categories. One, items that are quite old and are, a table or, footstool or something like that, they've got no foams in them. And then you'll have the other things that are the soft seating that will have foams in them. And typically with foams, they do, again, also from a hygiene point of view, they do get grubby and they're really difficult to make sure that they're of top quality still. But there's more and more sort of repair and reupholstering going on that do consider these. So I highly recommend that you retain the frames but reupholster. That's
We're running out of time. I've got lots more to ask you, but maybe we'll just finish on a couple of things. Do you have an example of a house that you've been into that you could just tell us some things about and how it evolved?
Been to or worked on?
In the past, and preferably a new build if possible, but if not, just some refurbishment.
New build, I've only worked on residential developments, but I wouldn't say they're of note in any other way.
Fair enough, yeah.
But for a private residence that we worked on for one of our mentors and really good friend this happened to be in Chelsea, but this was very much a sort of iterative process, and the brief was beautiful. It was, as a couple, they would be happy in there. That was her brief, and the husband's brief was that he wanted to have lovely conversations with his daughter in the living room. And, that's the kind of brief we can respond to and we think is the right kind of objectives for a home, if that makes sense. Homes are where people live in. It's the relationships that people have, and the interiors contribute to them in positive or negative ways, and we always want to make them positive. So in this home, we'd like to think, and the feedback we've got, you can ask our client, are positive. They're very happy. And this was an example where, this was a grade 2 listed building. And so we had to work with limitations from English Heritage, and then also existing furniture and artwork. So we had to work around that, but at the same time create a new stage in this couple's life. And so it was a beautiful project for us to work in. Every point or decision we made, environmental impacts were very much part of it. Some of them the client was very happy to go with. Some of them were limited by budget, so were swapped out. And well-being was always the target, emotional as much as physical, and the body's health. So that was a really good project that I would, feel quite happy about.
Finally, then, is there anything else in this conversation, just getting an overview of interior design and also trying to make that as sustainable as possible, anything else that we should add in?
I think it's understanding the life cycles, how long you're going to be there and what are you designing for. That is very, very important for many reasons. One, to get it right and get something you're happy with, but two, so you don't waste that and change sooner rather than, later. So making sure you can have the longest life cycle of the space that makes you as happy and as positive, makes a positive life, basically, is the most sustainable option.
Elina, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Head online to take a look at the show notes that accompany this session, houseplanninghelp.com/171. You can review all the main information, check out a couple of photos. We talked about that case study. And if you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, do that at the bottom of the show notes. We'll link you to Elina on Twitter, also Grigoriou Interiors, houseplanninghelp.com/171. My call to action is to get yourself on the VIP early bird list for the Hub. Enrollment is currently closed, but the doors will reopen again towards the end of the year. So houseplanninghelp.com/join so you can find out what it's all about. We have things like the progress calls, the modules, the private members forum. And I'll talk about one other aspect in a bit more detail. This is the video case studies. Obviously, I run a production company, so this is something that I thought, how can we use video and be really smart here? And what we've tried to do is to go and cover entire self-builds. Now, that's quite resource intensive. but I think it's going to be worth it, and we've had really good feedback from our videos that we've produced so far on 2 case studies, on Long Barrow and on Buckinghamshire Passive House. They're both different types of build, and that's the idea, that we'll cover different build systems. At the moment, we've got one with insulated concrete formwork and the other one with a timber frame, the PH15 system from Passive House Homes. And we'll also, hopefully, over time, just look at varying constraints. Different issues will come up. The obstacles, how have they been overcome? You learn so much by checking out a site. And I suppose it's quite difficult for any individual to return to site. As I find when I'm going down there and doing filming sessions, it just advances so quickly that every week we can do a bit of filming so that you can sit in the comfort of your home, go through those videos as and when you're ready, snack on them. They're short, but just very much focused on decisions. houseplanninghelp.com/join. Next time, John Palmer from Inhabit is my guest, and we're going to be looking at passive house principles. If you're not going for the full standard, where exactly should you be aiming and why, and how does the law of diminishing returns actually manifest itself in practice? I think this is going to be a really interesting one, actually. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.